Hello and welcome to the Junkyard Love Podcast.
At what age do we learn how to have better conversations? At what age do we learn to have better conversations with ourselves?
Hey folks, welcome to the Junkyard Love Podcast. It's me, your host, Mayor, from the Powerpuff Girl TV show series. This week, we've got Jaycie Randall on the podcast. I'm pumped to share. Wow, we really covered some great stuff. Childhood trauma, healing, spirituality, spiritual awakenings. Oh man, just so much good stuff. This episode is packed full of fantastic bites, bits, snippets, gold nuggets. If you do enjoy anything from this podcast, if you found something that was profound, if either of us said something that really stands out to you, if there's something that's said that is helpful to you in your life or to someone that you love in your life, just maybe take a little screen grab, send it to them, tell them to check it out, and send them the time to start it at. I think this stuff really helps actually heal people when it gets shared and when it gets to the right ears. So I wish that for you all. I hope you are all doing well in this particular time of COVID and in this pandemic. And now it's been almost a year. And, as a mental health advocate, I just have to say, I see you, all of you, everybody. I see you. Like, this is hard right now. What's going on? Everybody's life trajectory has been changed. We've now been forced to take different forks in the path of our lives. So, if you're going through it right now, just know, like, I see you. I see you. You're going to be okay. You got this. You can handle this. Just keep consuming content like this. Just keep trying to consume positive, good content. Be nice to yourself. Please, please, please be drinking your water, stretch, movement. This is the time when we got to be taking the extra time out of our day. We've got to be taking the extra time to love ourselves. I mean, it's just as simple as that. You've got to be loving yourself extra right now. You got to be patient with yourself. You've got to be willing to not be so hard on yourself right now. Stuff is crazy and it's happening to everybody across the world. Our country's pretty nuts right now, but across the world, man, the humans are experiencing a new virus and the leaders have not responded well to it. The society we live in is undergoing vast change, and we're all going to be part of it, but that change is uncomfortable for now. So just know I see you. It's going to be all right. We're going to get through this. Everything's good. Everything's going to be okay. We got this. Keep learning, keep feeding that soul knowledge, and let's get rocking and rolling with this podcast. Miss Jaycie, have a good one. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Junkyard Love Podcast. I am here with my friend Jaycie. Hello, Jaycie.
Hi, how's it going?
It is going good, my friend. It's good to see you. It's good to have you on the podcast again. You were you were in the first 10. I ended up deleting I probably told you the story. When I very first started the podcast, I deleted my first 5 episodes, like completely on accident. I messed up, but you were in the first 10 for sure.
Oh no.
Yeah. So
Oh wow.
me to stumble through. I was still trying to figure out a direction for the podcast at the beginning. I wanted to just have it conversational and casual, but I also really wanted to do something mental health, somehow helping people, somehow giving people valuable content and allowing people to maybe see new ways and new perspectives in their own life and relate to the other person. So I really appreciate you coming on in the first stages and letting me just totally stumble through, not knowing exactly what I'm doing. I still don't really know what I'm doing. I definitely still stumble through 100%. But at the beginning, listening back, it's almost cringy in some aspects. It's really hard to listen to your voice.
100%, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. No, 100%, I agree with you. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but But yeah, no, I think that same thing. When you shared that, like I listen back to that too and think of like where I'm at today, and I'm like, ooh, I'm like cringing at
Mm-hmm.
some of the things in the conversation. That's why I posted on my story to share that. I'm like, I think of so much growth from
Right.
compared to that first episode to this one.
Well, so let's give a background. Like, so let's say, how have you changed since then? I mean, you've been doing a ton of work. You started your own business. I mean, things have totally shifted. There's a lot of changes in the world for everybody listening to the podcast, but also just in yourself, in your self development. So what has your changes looked like in the last year or since that last podcast? Like, what are you up to now, Jaycie?
Oh, that's a good question. So many changes. What am I up to? So yeah, starting my website, my business. I've kind of stepped more into like my spirituality, into like my channeling, my gifts, whatever you want to call it. And I've been able to like help people, also helping myself, because like you help and work with people and it's almost like a reflection mirror, and it almost simultaneously like whatever they're releasing, I end up releasing within that space as well. And yeah, being like more present, being more less anxious, actually less, because I like hopping on that podcast, I was like so reserved and so quiet and like hadn't really found like my space in like the social media world or just like
Mm.
my personal world in general, and like being able to really expand, building relationships and like healthy long-standing relationships that are near and dear, which like I've always kind of struggled with. It's kind of like one of my um like attachment issues is, building long-standing relationships and those kind of dynamics. And yeah, growing into being like a family um person, which I never really was. I was always super disconnected from family and kind of, learning how to really love my family for who they are and what they are in this moment, and not kind of expecting anything from them, and being present more and showing up for the people who need it. And yeah, that's kind of what's been happening.
Yeah. Okay. Well, how'd you get there? Like, what have you been doing? What was your trajectory, I suppose, since last time? Like, so you've been doing. Let's explain. You've been healing.
Hmm.
I don't know if you use terminologies like shadow work.
Hmm.
Going through childhood traumas, like all that, this sort of stuff. So, what is healing? Like, how can you say, if I say, how have you changed in the last year, and you were explaining to someone like, here's how you can change, and here's these things that I discovered, like trauma healing and working with your past and reframing your limiting beliefs, these sorts of things. So how did you get to where you're different than you are now, or were back then, rather?
How have I changed? How have I got here doing all the work? So I hit a like low point. Um, I mean, like I don't know, like I went through, super serious like traumatic event. I don't really like I haven't really communicated with the world about that, in general. But yeah, going through like a super serious traumatic event, like losing, a near and dear person to me, and kind of going through that shift, and just like watching that play out, like watching this person like lose their life and like being, in the front seat of that. And I numbed myself out for a long time and kind of used like my codependency to numb that out. And yeah, I transitioned into like a really low energy, super depressed, like not suicidal, but like I just like didn't want to be here. I didn't want to be alive. I didn't want to do anything. I couldn't get out of bed to go to work. I couldn't do a lot of things. And I just hit a really, really, really low point, and I was like, man, I cannot do this. Like I'm not gonna make it like another year if I like sit in this position. And so I had to really dig deep, and it started from, yeah, just not wanting to be sad. I think I went to therapy. I started going to therapy after like a year, after like my accident. And the therapist looked at me and she literally said, you have to do the work. Like it's hard work to be happy. And I just was like so taken back. Like my victim mentality was like, what? It doesn't just happen to me.
Yeah. Look
Like
what
the
happened
world
to me.
just doesn't give me that. Like, yeah. And so from there I was like, you know what? You're right. Like I dug deep. I started doing the work, like, yeah, a lot of journaling, a lot of therapy, a lot of working out. I had to start, getting my heart rate up and doing that. And a lot of, I've had a lot of help from people too, like, family members. I have a family member who's like super spiritual. She's actually a medium. This is kind of where like all my gifts come from. And I work with her pretty frequently and pretty often. And she was kind of like my backbone for a minute. Um, and yeah, I got into this relationship now that I'm in and engaged to get married to, who is so like independent and strong and like, had to really put his shit together. And so me coming into that dynamic, very codependent, very broken, very victimhood, very not on my 2 feet, like not standing on my own. And he was just like, you have, like, I'm here for you, but like, you have to do it. And so that also helped me too. So yeah. And then it's just kind of like a spiral effect from there, really. Yeah. Looking at myself, getting up in the mirror and just being like, okay, this is what I want to do. And yeah, I don't even know. It's just been how I've dug so deep into this like awesome aspect and like who I am today, but it just kind of all fell into place. And now I love doing the work. I love getting up and I love, doing the little things and filling up my day with stuff that, may seem not super fun, but after you do it, it gives you that like fulfillment of like, man, I accomplished that. And now I feel so much better mentally. And yeah, I don't know if
Yeah.
that explained it.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. It makes me think of, you've probably heard this analogy before, because I was thinking of like, oh yeah, you've rebuilt yourself, you've built yourself into who you are, and but I was also thinking you've gotten rid of who you aren't. And I was thinking of this
Mhm.
analogy that you may have heard this, basically like a block of clay. The sculpture exists within the block of clay. You just have to remove the parts that are not the sculpture. It's in there. And so it sounds like you're kind of, building into things that were always there, or leaning into parts of yourself that were kind of underneath some clay, so to
Mhm.
say. And you said something that stuck out to me is your when you're talking to your therapist, and your victim mindset peaks up and starts like trying to defend you. And so, that's kind of like being triggered. So let's explain, like, what's the difference between a victim mindset and say a growth mindset, for someone who, because for me, when I think of me being a victim, it's not until I look back at me in retrospect and be like, oh, I was putting myself in the victim spot. But during those points, I wouldn't have said, oh, I'm acting like the victim right now, I'm being dramatic Jake. I would have just found justification. So what is the victim mindset and what is growth mindset, or where you're at now?
Yeah, so the victim mentality is like the world owes me something. Everything's happening to me, not for me. Everything that's happened is just so hard and so like disheartening and it's almost like, you feel like the world's just kind of caving in on you
Yeah.
and you're incapable of stopping it, which is now we'll transition into like a growth mindset where like the world can feel like it's caving in, but instead of sitting and letting it, you kind of like push it back up and you're like, I've got this, the world's happening for me, not to me. And you're capable of making all of the transition and the shifts in your mentality, how you speak, how you present yourself, how you show up for your people surrounding you, whatever the case may be. And it really, and I'm not going to say positive in like an unhealthy positive manner, but just like being real and being honest with yourself and the fact that like you're capable of making those changes and you're capable of doing the work. The victim mentality is like, I don't want to do the work. I just want it to be done. And the growth mindset is like, I'm ready to do the work. Like, let's fucking go.
Mm-hmm. So did you have to start, like, what was the internal talk for you? Did you, like, because for me, I asked because I basically had started, I had, my sudden realizations of sorts, but then it was like, wow, I've got a lot of work to do. And for me, I just
Mm-hmm.
started really inserting tons of Audible and YouTube content and like reading more books and stuff, kind of shoving the Tony Robbins positive mindset, just to kind of like counterbalance when I would have those thoughts. Now I have awareness of it, and so my brain is telling me like, oh, this is oh, another bad thing happened. Just my luck. Of course, this is what happens to Jake. This is the like just reaffirming my self-loathing story with that victimhood. But I started changing my daily inner talk by listening to Tony Robbins and a lot of Jordan Peterson and just motivational stuff. How did you adjust your inner talk, your inner voice? What happened for you there at the beginning?
It was actually Eckhart Tolle, oddly
Oh
enough. Is
yeah,
that
we talked about his book. Yeah, we went on a walk.
Yeah, we did. So it was there's a couple books, but that was like really the transitional moment. So actually before the accident, so this was like Cinco de Mayo 2017. Before that, I had moved up to Orcas Island. I was living there with my best friend, and I lived in an RV with like no running water, just power. And I lived by myself with my cat. And I was just like chilling. Like I was just like, I'm here to heal. I'm here to do this. And I was
Wow.
working a little part-time gig um, at this little shop, and I would only work a couple hours a day. And I decided to go to like the little bookstore because there's like a little town, little bookstore. And I had no idea who Eckhart Tolle was. And I picked up The Power of Now, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna read this book. Like that was kind of the starting point of like my, okay, I'm gonna start healing. And I showed it to my friend, and she's like super spiritual, intuitive. Like yeah, she's just awesome too. And she was like, oh, I love him. I listen to his audiobooks all the time when I'm like driving home, because it's like an hour ferry ride and then a 3.5 hour drive to town,
Jeez.
Longview. Yeah. So I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I started reading that book. And it just really taught me how to be present and like not, which is, a super big factor in healing and being happy and being just like, I don't know, feeling whole and feeling complete is being right here, right now. Like nothing else matters. Like the past isn't real, the future is not real. All you have is right now. And I remember I was hanging out with a friend, and I remember reading this part in this book, and it said, um, sit where you're at, go sit outside, and like just look at the trees and pay attention to like what aura it gives off, like what the leaves look like, what the whole tree in itself, like that is like an energy, that's like a being. Like look at what it's presenting to you.
Mm.
And I still, like 4 years later, still look at and hold on to that just phrase in that entire book. And that was kind of what shifted my process into like looking at my past and being like, oh my gosh, poor me, to like, it doesn't fucking matter. Like none of it matters. All I have is right here, right now. And I create that moment. So yeah, that book was a really monumental one. I literally recommend that book to anybody and everybody all the time, because it was a huge shift for me. And then there was another one, You Can Heal Your Life, by Louise Hay or Louise K. I can't remember her last name. Um, yeah, that one was just I don't know why, but those two are the only two books that really stick to me.
Yeah,
But
I actually haven't read either of those. I haven't read The Power of Now still. I consume a good amount of Eckhart. Like I go every couple months, I'll go through, like a week or two of listening to a lot of his lectures and talks. But I still haven't read The Power of Now. But I've heard from more than just you that it's like a life-changing book. It's definitely a perspective shifter.
mm, yeah, honestly, I don't know if I would have been able to make the transition or have the perspective going, because I read that as starting like February 4 years ago. And then like after my accident, like that was like still sticking with me in such a huge monumental um like book in my life. And it really helped me through a lot of, I like, that was just a huge transitional period in my life, and I really needed that. So I'm really thankful that I got to read that beforehand.
Mm.
um yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So going back to your flip from victim mentality into growth mindset. So like what would your, if you had to compare, okay, here's what Jaycie did 6 months ago when she didn't realize that she was being a victim. And then here's what Jaycie does now when she has these same thoughts, these same, because there's still days like you're on your path of healing, but I'm sure there's still days, correct me if I'm wrong, where you feel down, where your internal dialogue is the victim mindset, and you have to catch yourself. What is the difference between then and now? Like, what do you tell yourself now, or 6 months after realizing you had been the victim?
Mm, the difference between then and now is like back then, I was like shovel in hand digging, you know what I mean? Like, oh my gosh, let me find the words to elaborate this in like the right way that I want to. Like each time I was digging, I was like, well, this person said this to me, and like, I don't deserve that. I don't understand why. Like, I'm not doing anything wrong. Or like, my parents did this to me, and like, I don't understand. Like, why do you, do this and da da da, or whatever the case may be. And then also just now stepping out of that is not having any expectations of people or having what's the words I'm looking for? I'm so sorry. I guess now stepping out of that would be just being, I don't know, grateful um, for everything that I've like gone through, and understanding that it's all for like a deeper purpose and a deeper meaning, and knowing that I like ultimately spiritually chose to go through those. And so I
Mm.
hold on to that. Um, and yeah, that's kind of what I hold in. I can elaborate that too, I guess. Like spiritually, when you, I don't know, we're gonna go real spiritual here. So like when
Definitely
you
go all in, Jaycie. Definitely.
okay, so when you like incarnate, right? You come here, your energy, your soul becomes like a human being. Like
Mhm.
you ultimately like choose the life path that you can have. You can make different decisions and it can alter your pathway. Ultimately, you have like this, certain direction, certain pathway that you can follow, making each decision. So the parents that you have, you choose. The life that you grow up as a child, you choose. So all the trials, all the trauma, all of everything that feels like an uphill battle and an uphill climb, you choose coming here. And you yeah, so realizing that and understanding that perspective and knowing that everything that I went through was like my choice. um, and like, now I'm making a choice to change from, oh, that happened to me, like, well, no, I let that happen to me, I allowed that to happen to me.
Yeah, I had something to
And
learn from that. So I made
mm,
myself, in order to get where I'm at now, I had to go through that thing, of course, right?
yeah, yeah, 100%, yeah. And so having that kind of mentality has really shifted from, oh, poor me, all of this happened to me, to like, no, it's okay. Like now I am the person that I am. I have the depth that I have. I can understand, so many other people who maybe don't feel understood
Mm.
um, today in society, and really need somebody to advocate for them or like speak for them, or, see through them and understand that there's underlying pain and underlying trauma that needs to be helped healed. There's a lot of people can do it on themselves, but they also need somebody like pushing them. So that's kind of like my perspective in pushing gold to keep me out of the victim mentality. Is like my purpose here isn't to um, like roll over and just let things happen to me. My purpose here is to kind of go through all of that, heal through them, and then allow the space for other people to open up and heal as well. So
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I love that. I I think about I notice my victim mentality all the time. Like it's, I've been healing for kind of generally saying I've been on the path of healing for the last couple of years. But
mm,
I still notice recently, like, oh shoot, my story behind that is stuck in victim mindset. Like I even noticed, so for example, I've had a few podcasts these last few days in explaining my story of like here's how my childhood went, and like sometimes even just trying to explain what happened to me or explaining how my life went, I fall into a victim narrative, and I kind of question. I'm like, is there a way that I could, not deny that reality, but see it and maybe transform? Like, how could I even change the wordings of what I'm saying to, like, yeah, this thing happened to me, but of course it had to happen because now I can, be in this position. And I'll notice, just as an example, that pops to mind, when I first started this work, like, over a year ago, if I was explaining my situation when I was in my teenage years, I lived with a family friend who for very cheaply rented me her upstairs room, and so I kind of had like my own little apartment up in her home. And explaining that over a year ago, I would have said like this woman who like I've called her my nana in my life, but this one, like, I would have called her also a hoarder, like, because she had a lot of stuff. She had her own things that she was going through in her own life. She had a rough life herself, but I would have focused on the fact that she had a lot of things in her house, rather than like this was this like very full of wisdom, wonderful guidance human being in my life, like, who gave me a place to live when I sincerely needed it, and who gave me valuable advice, all of these things. And I would listen to myself the way I'd be talking before. I wouldn't even realize that I'm almost like trying to be more of a victim. Like, yeah, when I was a teenager, I had to live with a hoarder. When in actuality, like, yeah, some things went, I didn't get to live with my family, and that did suck, but I got to live with someone who like gave me very valuable life advice for the rest of my life, who showed me love,
Mhm.
who let me into her home. So even just reframing the stories that are not only our internal narratives that we speak to ourselves, but kind of even the explanations of our life and how things happen to us and who is the bad guy in this story. So that's how me personally, how I'm still changing my victim mindset, right? I having this podcast, I hear myself. Sometimes I'll still slip up and I'll say some things that are trying to make me, sound or feel more special, or more like, here's the reason why I'm not showing up the best of my ability, because I had this thing that happened to me, and we identify with those things. Do you? So you work with a good amount of people now, and you've had more interactions with different people who are on their own paths. What has been your experience with other people shifting from their victim mindset? Like, do you find, kind of like how the story I just explained, do you find other people stumble upon those sorts of things as well? Like, do they shift out of their victim mindset in different ways?
Yeah, 100%. I definitely work with, yeah, like I work with women mostly.
Mm.
Um, yeah, but yeah, they do. It's like but it's almost like you have to like point it out. Like not point out their victimhood, but like point out that like what I kind of rephrase is like we choose this life, we kind of choose what we go through. Um, but also you kind of have to point out that like you're able to like shift from this, because that's kind of the perspective. Like when you're in victimhood, you don't realize that you're like in a victimhood mentality, until you have somebody be like, okay, well, like here's all this going on, but like here's the reality of the situation.
Mhm.
And that's kind of like, yeah, so watching these women go from, well, this is kind of the situation. um but yeah, like I don't know. It's really hard to explain because everybody kind of like differentiates. They all have like their own trials and they all have
Right.
different perspectives. But yeah, watching these women go from like, here's like all my trauma to like, wow, I'm feeling really good and I'm feeling really empowered and I'm feeling really passionate and I'm feeling like, I can do and I can shift and I can change my mentality and I can no longer sit in the poor me perspective to
Mm.
I'm gonna make shit happen. And
Yeah, that's cool. You can really be, kind of the mediator of their best self, or something
mm,
like that. They can tell you, here's what happened to me, here's this story, and you'd be like, okay, that is what happened. That is what's going on. There's a reality there. Is that reality helpful to you going forward in the future? Is there, not just two sides to the story, but um, I don't know. The word reframing is pretty powerful. Like when you can really
mhm.
take a look at the things that hurt you and the things that built you and the things that made you um, put on certain bulletproof vests, like different armor that we all wear, different ego masks that we all wear, different versions of ourselves that we feel need to show up in different ways. I think you can come to an age where you begin to ask yourself, is this helpful? Is this something I want to hang on to? Is this going to give me the life that I truly want to live before I leave my body? And man, that's super powerful. So how has it been? We're definitely in if I put my foot in my mouth here, definitely correct me. I don't know a lot of the proper terminologies, but I do know that we're in the age of Aquarius now, right? So,
Mhm.
along with a lot of this, from what I observe and from what I see, and like when I focus on what a lot of like the YouTube content I absorb, we talk about the feminine energy rising, and to
Mhm.
me, that's super. I love facilitating this. I have a friend, my friend Josh, who was on the podcast a couple days ago. He had explained to me a few weeks back, basically like pointed out to me something I didn't really notice, my vulnerability as a male, to discuss these things. He was like, it's I don't know if he used the word important, but he pointed it out and thanked me for it and said that it's good and it will help, facilitate conversations that I think need to happen. So using my voice and my strong, though I'm a male, I have strong feminine energy, or I have at least some sort of understanding of it. So I see, in the world, this feminine energy rising up, and I think it's like, oh, of course we need it right now. Like it's exactly what we need. So do you see, how do you see feminine energy? And let's also, how would you describe, for someone who is like, what are you talking about, bro? Feminine energy, masculine energy, like what is that? What are you even saying? Like, can you try to explain that to someone who's never heard the terminology before? And then where do you see it happening in our world?
Yes. Okay. I'm so excited that you brought this up. I love this. Um, yeah. So for first and foremost, we have like our inner child, right? We have our maternal, inner paternal, which is like feminine to masculine energy. So you have an inner masculine, inner feminine energy within everybody. So the masculine energy is like the provider, the caretaker, the working bee, the busy, like, okay, I got this, you know what I mean? And kind of creates the space for the feminine energy, which is like creative and flowing and like soft and gentle and like still empowered. But like, so they, like yin and yang, like they
Mhm.
work together, they mesh together, they need each other to, um, you know, be whole and be complete and be really at peace. So when you have the masculine energy, which is more predominant, I guess, which is kind of where the world has been for many centuries,
Mhm.
it's really based on a lot of ego, a lot of like intensity, a lot of really, I don't know, like not trusting the feminine, a lot of like I don't I don't know how to explain this other than just like sharp tongue, like just really, really intensely sharp, really intensely like it's just yeah, just like the most egotistical, I guess, human being, which sounds kind of shitty to say, is like probably not in tune with their feminine energy. And then when you have the feminine energy that doesn't trust the masculine energy, you tend to like shove the masculine down. And that's where you kind of get the push pull where they're like going, going, going. You see a lot of women that are like going, going, going and working really hard and trying to like overcompensate for that masculine energy, but they're almost like on a rat wheel and they're not really
Mhm.
getting anywhere. They're not really creating like that abundance or like, a lot of women feel stuck, but most of those women or men, I guess I shouldn't stereotype, but most of those women or men who um, feel stuck tend to not trust their masculine energy and they kind of need that to like create what they're going for, create what they're doing, I guess you could say. So now we're kind of anchoring that in, opening up that door to like feminine energy. And um, yeah, that's kind of where the age of Aquarius comes in. Um, because we need it. We've had a really masculine world, and it's kind of led us to where we're at right now. And I don't know
Yeah.
about you guys, but it's pretty shitty.
Yeah, we can't keep doing just the only masculine thing without looking at our valuable resource of balance with feminine energy. Of, I mean, we got to look at, if we continue to do things exactly the way in which we have been doing them, do we have optimal chances of survival? And the answer is literally no right now. I mean, which we need
No.
to listen to and say, okay, what can we do differently? Like, what voices in the room can we bring to the forefront, to the front of the table? Like, like it's time for the way in which we've been doing things. Like, thank you, you've served us well, but it's time for something new. It's time to listen to new voices, because we need creative and um, creative, loving, and gentle new opportunities for our ways of being as a culture, as a society. But we also, at the same time, I will say, we need to not throw out the masculine energy. We need to be assertive. We need to get our damn work done. We need to be strong. But I think that, combining the feminine energy with the masculine energy in our culture, like, it just seems so apparent how much power that will really bring us. Like, what's really this holding hands of divine parts within human beings, that we've for a long time just kind of suppressed and kept down the feminine energy. And so, for someone listening who still has no idea when we're talking about feminine energy and masculine energy, um, all males and females have masculine and feminine energy.
Mm-hmm. It's like yin and yang ball, I guess. That's the only way that I can explain it, is like you need them both. But yeah, yeah, and it's also like super intense too, because for like in order to kind of spread that, we need a lot of women, but mostly men, to be more vulnerable and be more open, because as a society we have ultimately let men kind of shut down. Like, we shut men down for having feelings, for having emotions, for having, like, opening up, for being creative, for being, like, okay, go out in the field, go work, take care of your family, provide. um but don't open up, you can't cry, you can't like express yourself or whatever. It's kind
Mhm.
of viewed in that way. And I think that anchoring in the feminine energy is kind of opening up that doorway of like, okay, men should express themselves, men. And not like, this isn't just, I guess, at men, but as a society, that's kind of what we've
Mhm.
leaned toward. We've leaned toward like not allowing them to express themselves. But yeah, so I think that that's kind of where we're heading in, is like empowering the feminine energy, but also allowing the masculine energy to like open up and feel really good about expressing and releasing, because that's what we need, is releasing. We need to shed, we need to dive deep into the shadow and the emotions and whatever that looks like.
Mm.
So yeah.
Cool. You just said shadow. Let's talk about shadow work. Like, what is our shadow? I mean, because we have there's a collective shadow, and that's,
Mhm.
oh man, that's a couple podcasts worth of describing, like, how we're living alongside that, and with that, within each of our psyches. But um, shadow work. So these are terminologies that, if I would have read 4 years ago, I would disregard them. I would brush them off. I'd be like, that's some weird hippie shit that I don't mess with. So, like, I want to try to connect to my old foolish naive self, like, or people who are, maybe coming in from that same location. Like, I don't want to lose them here. I want to keep them, like these are just words to describe things that belong within each of us, with deep within our psyche, in our consciousness, and our being as individuals, and our being as a collective. So, words like shadow work. How do we explain this to someone who's never heard any of these terminologies before? I'm sorry, JC, I'm giving you like these very difficult questions. Thanks for hanging with me on this.
No, you're totally fine. No, I love it. So shadow work is like the parts of yourself that you don't see. So that can mean good or bad. Most of the time we kind of, and I say that quote unquote bad. There is no good or bad. There just is. Um, that's like a whole other perspective. I'm sorry. Um, but yeah, that it's good or bad. So it can mean like all of the really good qualities that maybe like other people can see you as, but you don't always see yourself as. Like you kind of downplay your good qualities, but somebody else could explain to you like, oh wow, like she's a superstar or he's a superstar. They do this, and they're like, and then you looking at yourself, you're like, oh wow, okay, like I would have never viewed myself as that.
Mm,
Or on the other perspective, the quote unquote bad, it's like all of the things that you have kind of shoved in your closet and you refused, or like in your suitcase, you like have refused to kind of look at it or have
mhm,
like not been able to see it. And so it's like unpacking like all of your childhood trauma, emotional trauma, um, all the pain. Because pain is energy, but energy forms into like reality, I guess you could say. So like stress and whatever stress comes out and like knots in your shoulder. So you create that energy. Um and so yeah, ultimately it's like massaging those out, but like emotionally, I guess you could say.
mm. Yeah, I like that. It's funny. I feel like you triggered me right when you started talking about shadow work being not only the things that you are ashamed of, the things that that are in your past that you don't like to look at. That when you bring it back up, it's painful to look at. Because I went through a lot of that, like where I'm like trying to make myself face myself from before, but I
Mhm.
still work. I'm still actively the shadow work side of. Um, Self worth in absorbing compliments and listening when people say thank you, or like the messages when people are like, wow, thank you for making that video, or thank you for saying this on your podcast that really helped me, or thank you for sharing this post or whatever. Like I still have a lot of trouble with that, and that's interesting. That's cool to call it shadow work too, because those are things that I actively struggle with. Like I've looked at my demons. I've gone toe to toe with those guys. The things of my past. I've made amends in my own psyche. I've accepted things from my own past within my own self. But in the present, when it comes to just believing people, we talked the other day about imposter syndrome, just believing people when they
Yes.
say like thank you, or like hey, you helped me, or whatever, and not immediately thinking like, well, if you knew me and you knew all my deepest darkest secrets, you wouldn't be thanking me, you would hate me. Like there's still that, that I work
Mhm.
with, and I try to be gentle and kind to myself. But it's not always easy. I try to notice when it happens, but sometimes it gets by me and I end up self-loathing for 3 hours. So
Mhm.
imposter syndrome too, I feel like we could work that in here. Have you ever dealt with imposter syndrome yourself?
Good Lord. I that was actually super like triggering for me because like I've never put it into words, you know what I mean? Like that was it's come up more frequently lately. Like you and like another girl I follow on Instagram posted something about it. So I think it's like surfacing for a reason.
Mm,
Um for not only, you and I individually, but the collective. I feel like we kind of all collectively go through certain things at the same time, oddly enough. And so that's kind of something that's popping up. But yeah, going through imposter syndrome, I haven't really like dove super deep into it, but just from the conversation the other day, like, wow, just to put like all of my worry and anxiety and like, downplaying, like that is, shadow work, the good shadow work, I guess.
yeah.
Um, yeah, that is like something I definitely also need to work on is, seeing the value in who I am and what I bring to the table. And like how just how I am as a person. And I really downplay that. I really over stress. Like I will say something. Sometimes I'll say something in public and I'll come home and be like, Jace, was that awkward? Like, was I weird saying that? Like,
Dude,
and
yeah,
that
I
he's
know.
like, no, you're fine. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, yeah. But
Yeah, we convince ourselves of the silliest things. Totally. What is great is through the community that's being built and that has been built. Like through the podcast, and a lot of us who are in the same area doing our work. Like you and I will message each other with just like flame emojis, or like hey, keep going, like that sort of stuff. Like this supportive of our like inner healing friend group who are people who are trying to like put on and help others, and I'll notice Jay Sugawa, she'll message me. She is so encouraging, she's so positive, she's so sweet. She speaks right past my bullshit even through messages and just speaks to my soul. And she's like, hey, this is awesome, or like, hey, you're great, or like, this is beautiful, or I love this side of you, or whatever. And it's so hard for me to listen to her sometimes, but I know that it's good, and I know that what she's saying is true. But I'll have these guards up where I'm like, I'm not so good. Like, if you only knew me, whatever. I was actually gonna. So this mess. I don't know if we could see it here, but this is the imposter syndrome post that we had shared back and forth. I was thinking, what do you think about me reading the caption? Do you remember the caption being pretty profound?
I didn't. I just read like the actual post that you posted. But please read it. I would love to hear it.
Okay, so the post was it was from a couple days ago from anxietysupport.info. This is on Instagram, and it's kind of a lengthy read here, but it's worth it. So when I was reading this, I remember feeling like, dude, did they hack into my notes and like copy this and post it on there? So this is about imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome is a psychological pattern where a person feels internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. My sense of self is unstable, and I always feel like my personality is just a bunch of scattered fragments. The same fear plays in my head over and over. The fear that I have been faking my entire personality and image, and someone finally looks beneath the mask to uncover my true self, which is a bad person. I keep having this intrusive thought that I'm faking being a good person, and I'm actually terribly selfish and cruel, and I'm just pretending to care about other people. Logically, I know that that is very unlikely. Logically, I know that I'm just an average person who tries to be as kind as much as she can, but sometimes acts wrongly or says something hurtful, like most other people do as well. But imposter syndrome tells me that I'm terrible, and it's just a matter of time before everyone finds out and abandons me. I struggle deeply to feel like I deserve any praise or compliments or achievements or successes because I didn't work hard enough, and deep inside, I'm not a good person. Almost nothing feels earned or deserved. There's this looming feeling that everything will be taken away when people realize that I don't deserve them. If I get a job, I feel guilty because I think I tricked the employer into thinking I'm capable. When I get a nice DM on here, there's a voice in the back of my head that says, they wouldn't have said that if they knew who you really are deep inside. The more successes I have, the more intensely I feel that imposter syndrome becoming louder. I have been practicing intense self-compassion to alleviate my imposter syndrome. I could tell you more about self-compassion in my next post if anyone is interested in how I use it to cope with imposter syndrome as well as my mental health disorders. But yeah, this is a little bit of how imposter syndrome feels to me. Do you relate? How much does your imposter syndrome manifest? And what are some ways you cope? So that's, again, from anxietysupport.info. I don't know the author. I don't know their name, but wow, thank you to whoever took the time to write that out and be so vulnerable because, wow, like
Yeah.
reading that is just like, it's so, um, it just resonates so much, and I am glad that I'm in a place where it's not just triggering though. It's not just like, whoa, okay, that's uncomfortable. It's like, oh, that's something that I am still working on. I can almost hold space for myself just in reading it because it's like, okay, I'm not alone in this. Like there's someone else who deals with this as well, and yeah, man, I just really love that post. I totally had to read it.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you did. That was actually like such a good read and such a good perspective. And it's really intense, like that intense feeling of like not feeling like you're good enough and not feeling like you're or like you're yeah, like you're showing up and like not feeling like you feel authentic, but then after the aftermath, your anxiety kicks in or imposter syndrome kicks in and you're like, wait, was that like where am I at? What's happening? You know what I mean? Like, who am I? Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, it shows up for me in my comparison in myself now. Like I know you can't just say like, no, I'm a changed person. So anything shitty I ever did, like it doesn't mean anything anymore. There's some
Mhm.
extent of that, but there's also and maybe it's a lot of kind of like growing up in a small town area. Like we have like we I'm so afraid that when people see me now or they're watching this, like they only see me as who I was when I was 22. And they're like, I
Mhm.
know that motherfucker. He ain't like that. You know what I mean?
Oh my
And
God, I cringe
right,
all the time. Oh,
I
that's
feel the
like my
same.
biggest, yeah, biggest fear. I
Yeah.
hear you. Oof.
Well, I do get enough messages in people that does resonate with, and they say the same thing. Like a lot of people who, like I don't even know them that well, but we've met at parties or we've seen each other at the bar, or I know them, I've met them through me DJing and being in the same environments or whatever. And a lot of them will message me and say, I deal with this too. I've changed so much that you want when you meet people or you see people who you used to know, you almost you want to control who you are in their eyes. You're like, please don't see me as
Mhm.
that person I used to be because I've changed so much that you're going to be talking to someone who's not really here anymore, you know?
Mhm.
And I think that that comes with a lot of healing, a lot of self-worth, self-work. And, this is probably a process of letting that go, like letting go what other people think about you for sure, but also allowing yourself the space to just be like, I'm changed, and as long as I know it, and I'm acting as if, like that's enough. That's okay with me. They can think what they want, but I would love the opportunity to prove to them now that I'm more stepped into myself. But
Mhm.
it's
100%. Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is. I hear you. I love that. That's like such a good perspective. Yeah, just being comfortable with like um where you're at, what you're doing, and which is very hard for our community and just our society in general, especially with like comparison. We have huge social media platforms, high expectations,
mm,
that we, feel like we have to, most of us anyway, feel like we have to kind of upkeep with. And like in reality, like who gives a shit? We don't have to do anything we don't want to do.
right.
We, compare ourselves and we, yeah, just comparing ourselves to even in the past, which like the past isn't even present. So it doesn't, all of that. That's another perspective of the power of now. Like the past isn't here. It's not right in this moment. Like it's not affecting this present moment unless you allow it to affect this present moment and like your mentality. So it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Um, and obviously I know easier said than done, but that's something I always have to kind of hold on to is like, uh, I know who I am. I know what I bring to the table. I know like all the change and the growth that's really happened. So as long as I just keep continuously showing up for myself, like that's enough and that's good. We're good to go. And it doesn't
Mhm.
really matter what, you know, other people think.
Yeah, because if you're kind of, you almost get stuck in the past when you're constantly thinking you need to prove to people in your past that you're not that person anymore.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's almost a waste of your time. Like you don't need to prove to anybody but yourself. You're the one living your lived experience.
Hmm.
Yeah. So how do you use in your healing? How do you use things like journaling, meditation, like these active? It's in its I think it would also be important to maybe explain to people who don't do journaling or they don't do meditation or they don't do even things like prayer, even things like positive affirmations, listening to positive affirmations on YouTube, like the work, right, to get our minds
Hmm.
into an optimal loving state. Um, let's give the let's hear about your journey with journaling, meditation, these sorts of things, and then let's try to give like an elevator pitch to someone who doesn't do these things, like try to convince them that they should.
Yeah. So my journey, I don't know, like I feel like my brain is like it's always going. Um, and it's just like crazy. So starting out with meditation was extremely hard for me. And then it's also funny because my brain goes like this all the time. It's like I need to do this and this and this. But then when I sit down to journal, sometimes it's really hard for me to like
Mm,
sit down and create. So I'm just putting this up front because a lot of the times people who don't want to start, they sit down, they're like, well, I can't really meditate. I'm not super good at it. Or like, I don't know what to journal. Yeah, my process in that was navigating and finding ways that it worked into my life and not just like the general population's life. And that's kind of what I preach, especially with my clients that I work with, is finding like certain prompts for journaling to where it's like easy and you're kind of effortlessly like they have like journals that you can use that have like, okay, tell me how you're feeling about this on this day, and da, da, da. So I had to start using little things like that to kind of get me motivated to write out my feelings and my process. Um, on the journaling aspect for meditation, I started really slow. I started doing like 10-minute guided meditations because that's about all I could sit down and do in one time frame in one moment was just like 10 minutes out of my day, with somebody kind of guiding me through it and talking me through it. Now I can sit and listen to like certain frequencies and I can sit for a little bit longer than that. And so that's kind of how that process went. But now, certain journaling, like I have so many different notebooks randomly like throughout the house. So when I'm like thinking of something I want to write down, I can, just jot down like affirmations or like if I need a little pick me up to do something.
Mm.
So yeah, that's kind of like how I've transitioned from like not wanting to do it to like, okay, I'm doing it to like, okay, yeah, like I need to take time out of my day. Like that's, an important aspect of my life and has really helped my healing process along
Yeah.
the way. So
Yeah, a lot of times we don't really know what we need to say. We don't know what we think until we think it, or we don't know what we think until we say it, or we don't know what needs to be said until it's said. Those sorts of things. We don't know exactly. Sometimes you'll write. You're like have some sort of intuition, and you're kind of writing something like, it's kind of in this subject. It's in this area, and you write it, or you write a half a page, or you write just one paragraph or one sentence, and you read it back, and you're like, wow. Like I didn't realize I had that in me. I didn't realize I needed to get that. And it's not about writing down things, that you're going to turn into your meditation teacher and he's going to give you a red ink pen grade, like, B minus. You didn't connect with self very much when you wrote that sentence. It's really for you. There's no rules. Like that was a big thing for me was, in the basement at the old place. I mean, I was like, write anything that comes to mind. If it seems profound in the moment, allow it to be profound in the moment. Write it on the wall, write it on sticky notes, write it in your notebooks, write it on this paper, type it up, whatever you got to do to get it out. Because it seems like a lot of this stuff, the psychological burdens that we carry, when they're ready to be dealt with, they come up and you can either have a reaction that will kind of, maybe push it back down, or like, I'm not ready to deal with this. Or you can say, okay, this feeling is coming up and I'm ready to allow it to come out. I'm going to allow it to process in whatever way it needs to begin processing. And a lot of times that means allowing allowing the words to fall out of your fingertips, and just saying what you need to say, and just saying what you don't realize you need to say. I think just sitting down, we're so fast paced nowadays. We're so, bite-sized, electronic. Like if you can pull out your notepad on your phone and you can type some stuff, excellent, do it if that's what works for you. But for me, there was really something about pen and paper, writing down, journaling, like free writing, allowing it to never be read, allowing it to never have to be presented to people or be a certain way. It's crazy how healing that could be.
100%. Yeah. No, and I love that too. And it's just, yeah. But even in those moments, though, sometimes I still like get cringy with myself when you're like, and I'm just bringing this up because it's human nature. Because sometimes we sit down and we kind of anticipate, and not everyone, but we anticipate journaling to be like this really like beautiful, like, and it is in what it is, but I guess just a different angle and a different perspective. Like sometimes I write things down and I'm like, ew, like, oh, I hope
Like for real.
nobody's gonna read this, but like, ew, what
Yeah.
are you doing? Like,
Yes.
it can be pretty gnarly, but like that's part of the healing process and a part of journaling in itself. So
Oh, yeah, that's actually a pretty important thing to point out. Just that, we've used words like cringy or like, ugh, we're describing that, but I think that really resonates with a lot of people, man. Like for example, a few months ago, and I'm still healing from this. I went through a big breakup, and it's hard to know like where I'm at with it. It's hard to know where I'm at in the healing of it. It's hard to know where I stand with it. And I've had a few times where I get home from work and I'm, I'll put some tunes on and I'm like, let's just write. And the first thing that comes up is like, dear ex-girlfriend, what, and it just, and not that you're going to send it to her or whatever. It's just kind of, but I'll write a half page and be like, oh my God, like if anybody ever read this, it's just embarrassing. And it's just cringy is the perfect word. But when it comes to healing, I mean, I remember when I first began, when I was dealing with a lot of suicidal thoughts, and I was dealing with a lot of self-loathing, and really just was not liking the person that I was being. I sat
Mhm.
down and I'm like, what the fuck's going on? And then once I started inserting positivity, or I started allowing these things to come out, or it all felt fake. It felt fickle. It felt like it was fabricated. I was like, what am
Mhm.
I doing? Thinking I could do some sort of spiritual work. Like, what the hell is this spiritual stuff? It feels so fake. And I think it
Yeah.
goes right in hand with that cringiness that we feel, that like, ugh, who am I to heal? Who, who am I to deserve this healing? Who am I to write something? Who am I to write a letter to my ex that she'll never read to help heal? I think these
Mhm.
are very human things that come up. What do you think? Like, have you experienced anything like that?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Yeah, and I think the like behind the scenes, like your being, your soul, like your whole identity in that moment, is like rejecting the new identity that you're creating.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and so like when you're um like rewriting, I guess, your identity, because ultimately that's like what you're doing, you're like your body naturally wants to be like, no, like I'm comfy, I'm sitting here, I'm comfy in this, semi misery, just because we don't feel worthy of being that positive, that uplifting, that whatever, which is also in itself it's all childhood trauma. Like everything that we do in our everyday lives is all stemmed to how we were raised and what that looks like. um, and so yeah, that's just another perspective. So every time you're like cringing, you're like, "Ew," I'm just think like I'm, rejecting this change, and that's okay. But you know what? I'm gonna just keep going through it and moving through it. So
Yeah, yeah. Almost forgiving yourself, like, oh, okay, that's that thing popping up. Let's just allow it. Like, let's allow it to pass because this is part of the story. This is part of the process. When it comes to things like childhood trauma, I think we should talk more about that because you know, I try to put myself in the shoes of like sometimes I'll be, going pretty in depth. I'll explain kind of what happened to me when I was a child, or like here's a part of my trauma, here's a piece of, and then I think like, if my mom were to be listening to this episode, which my mom doesn't listen to this, but if she were, like, the way that I explain things, it's hard to come to terms with it. I'm like, I'm not trying to insult her. I'm not trying to, um, point out like this is all that you were to me was only these terrible things, to my parents, because there's a lot of loving things. And now I totally just see like, oh, you were just, you were loving me to the best of your ability. Like you were raised by family, you were raised by parents who have their own collective trauma, who taught you things that they thought were the best for you at the time, and they just didn't work out, and for the trickle down. So because I think everybody kind of has childhood trauma, right? In a sense, like you have things that you learned at very uh, pinpoint times in your life, in your psychological development as a biological human being, that trained you to be certain ways or learn. I've used this example before. You might be afraid of snakes today because when you were 6.5, a dude with a snake on his shirt yelled at you, you know
mhm.
and you could say, oh, that's childhood trauma. This guy with the snake shirt traumatized me. And it's not about finding the victimizer, because then you get stuck in being a victim. That's not what childhood trauma is about. It's about recognizing the patterns that are no longer serving you in an adult that were taught to you as a child. Correct me if I'm wrong there. That's kind of what childhood trauma rings to me. What
Mhm.
does that sound about right to you, JC?
100%. Yeah. Yeah. And it is a kind of a like fickle thing when you're navigating through it all and you like don't want to offend your parents. But what's that? There's like a post or a phrase or a saying that's like, you can have um like trauma and still like childhood trauma, like, issues with like your parents or whatever, and still love them and respect them for who they are today. Like those two can correlate and like live comfortably together. Just because you have your trauma doesn't mean that you completely view, the other person in the situation or whatever as completely bad. It just is something that happened to you, and it's okay to express that and communicate and navigate through that trauma however you please. and to not allow, easier said than done, not allow that fear of like hurting somebody else, um, moving through your trauma, I guess.
Yeah. Wow.
But
Yeah,
yeah.
that's something that we definitely come up against. And then
Mm,
we change our story about it as we heal it, or we change at least our perspective about it, and the narrator of our everyday life that's playing in our head begins to form new opinions. But at the beginning, it does feel fickle. It feels fake. It feels imposterish. It feels
mm,
it feels like to me sometimes it feels like blame. Like I'm trying to find someone to blame for why I suck at this thing. You know,
mm.
why I suck at this thing now is because I was hurt when I was 5, and that helps me justify why I continue to do these bad behaviors or something. And that's not exactly the way to go.
No, no. So there's two ways to go about that too. So there's justifying it and then sitting in it and being like, that's just the way I am. You know what I mean? Like this happened to me when I was younger. And I feel like that's kind of justifying it. But there is also a really empowering feeling and realizing and recognizing where that stems from. Because that's ultimately how you can release your childhood trauma, is finding it at the base. And like I always elaborate this way, like we going in, blowing it up. There's still going to be little particles around that you kind of need to sweep up as
Mm,
you go. But that's kind of like how you navigate through your childhood trauma, is like going through. So there's like the victimhood where you just kind of sit in it, or there's like the growth mindset where like, yeah, that happened to me. I'm aware that happened to me, but that I'm also aware that I'm capable of, you know, blowing that trauma up and releasing it and like shedding those layers and, um, empowering myself within that trauma, redirecting my, pathways or timelines from, past to present.
yeah.
So,
Okay, let's do I have a proposition for you. What if I come to you? So say I'm one of your clients. You picked up a
mhm,
male client, and I come to you, and we have our one-on-one session, and I say basically like I can't stop thinking about the fact that let's say for an example, let's say I was sexually abused when I was a child, and it has affected me
mhm,
as a 20-something-year-old male, and it's part I think about it every day, and hate the people who did it, and or blah blah blah. So say I come to you and I'm like, where do I start? How can I forgive them? How can I let go of this need to hold on to that part of my story? Obviously this is like very intense. This is not a blanket statement that you can give everybody who's gone through these situations. But if you were
mhm,
someone, if I was someone who I'm like, I'm ready to meet the challenges. I'm ready to do the work. I know this is painful. I know this is deep, but I'm ready to tackle this. Like, what do I do, Jaycie? What do I do?
what do you do? Okay, so perfect. That is something that I do like to work with people. Is actually sexual trauma, so childhood trauma and sexual trauma. Um, but yeah, so I mean, it would be over a course of time. So I do offer, like different time frames of courses, obviously to the comfort of each person that comes to me, what they feel like doing. Um, but for that, it would be like an ongoing process where we would kind of meet like this. I have Zoom calls with my clients or FaceTime, whatever. Um, and there's like a few different dynamics that you can do. Ultimately, um, that kind of lies in like your like sacral chakra, because that's kind of where like your sexuality, for women, that's like your womb area. That's where all of that trauma lies. And then ultimately up to your solar plexus too, which is like your confidence and whatnot, because your confidence obviously drops down in that dynamic too. So your lower three chakras are ultimately like distorted, kind of, traumatized. You're ungrounded, you're dealing with sexual wounds, and then you're dealing with like your confidence. And so with each of those, I navigate in like a different dynamic for each of those. But I would probably start with expressing that, because a lot of people who come to me don't know about where those lie, because each different trauma lies in different areas of your body. um, and then expressing that, giving them certain exercises and activities based off of, each chakra, what what they need, what I feel like they need the most. We'll kind of go through each day with each, um, you know, different one. And then another thing that I do is um, I have like a guided, I've recorded this myself. I have like a guided meditation where I kind of make you face the person that's hurt you. Um, yeah, and you sit like in a room and I guide you through and allow you to express by closing your eyes, express how you want to speak to that person, how you want to let your anger out. You can like hit pillows, you can hit whatever the case may be, just kind of like really releasing all of that anger, frustration. I do this too myself. You end up crying, you end up really just being like really empowered. And then at the end of that, I have kind of like an inner child activity exercise where you kind of like speak to your child in like the time frame where that trauma happened, and just kind of like spiritually and energetically supporting that child and showing up for them in a way that you maybe didn't get, like protection wise, because sometimes situations like that happen and you weren't rightfully protected, or just telling them that it's going to be okay and that life life gets better and that you ultimately are going to heal. Yeah, so that's kind of just a few different ways that I
Yeah.
navigate very lightly, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So you bring up, so it's essentially sounds like, you get, it's like, okay, this person who experienced this tough thing when they were younger, they're ready to attack it. They're ready to face it. They're ready they're ready for the next step in the healing process, on the healing path, whatever that looks like for them as individuals. So you're going to get them in a safe environment, to basically, you know, bring back up that thing, but also, where our amygdala and our brainstem response when we think about those things, our heart rate increases, our palms get sweaty, knees weak, vomit on my sweater already. Sorry. But our,
Yes.
we are that biological response, like we can all feel it, when you think of something traumatic that happened to you, a lot of times it's, like if you deal with intrusive thoughts, like those come up and you're like, like it's another little cringy sort of thing. But
Exactly.
when you
Yeah.
can when you can slowly, softly, with love, with space, with the support of a guide too, bring those back up in a safe environment and say like, okay, I recognize my body is initiating this fear response. It is trying to, my biological vehicle is attempting to relive this to some extent, but it's okay. I'm in a safe spot. I'm relaxed. I'm here. Like, let's look at this as my adult version of myself. Let's talk to my 6-year-old version of myself. Man, that's so powerful. And I will say, I haven't done your guided meditations, JC, but I have had experiences. I may have talked to you about this before, but it's been over a year now. But when I was going through this, I had some periods of just, I mean, I was doing crazy amounts of yoga, tons of breath work, lots of meditation, lots of like hypnosis, um, just smoking a lot of cannabis, a lot of CBD, nootropics.
Hmm.
I was in another dimension, basically trying to heal all this stuff. But I actually had pretty profound, a rather euphoric, psychedelic experience, by listening to all these frequencies and stuff, and obviously, like, good amounts of marijuana in the right settings, in a right, very, very safe environment. I had my speakers on the floor, like right next to me, doing like deep yoga stretches for hours and hours. And I don't think this is how everybody would experience it. Like I was under the influence of quite a few things, in a sense. Uh, just like with nootropics and cannabis, and this in the sounds and all this stuff,
Yeah.
breath work. But I basically visualized my younger self, like my like teenage year self, actually, and basically had like a little unplanned ceremony that happened of me kind of, I saw, and again, this isn't like, God walked into my room and I saw him clear as day, as you and I, like I was aware that it wasn't, um the same physical here and now reality. This was a psychological experience, but I basically kind of saw my younger teenage year self in the room with me. I had a long crying session. I thanked him for the man that he was, in the armor that he put on to survive the things that I was going through at that time. And it was basically this, like, I got out of my own way and I thanked this younger version of myself. And I said, I got this from here, though. It's okay. Like, we can take off that armor. It's okay. I got you from here. So I basically showed up for my younger self as a grown man, and it psychologically helped me massively. Like, it turned on things. It healed things within me. It was a profound experience. And I through a lot of that area, I now consider it's like, oh, like I had around this time is when I had like a spiritual awakening, which is, an intense terminology. It's an intense word. It's like, again, if I would have heard this years ago, I would turn off this podcast right now, because I'd be like, that's some weird shit that I don't mess with. But that's how it was for me. I had an awakening of my true self, and I healed my younger, childhood wounds that were really affecting me in many ways. And I'm still working on all these sorts of things, but that was a pretty profound one. And I think, people have their own versions of access to this, and it is very healing. And I think it's super great that you offer a doorway, a pathway for other people with that.
Yeah, thank you. Wow, that's super powerful, and that's so cool. And that's something that a lot of people have trouble navigating through, is like really facing that. So props to you for being able to kind of sit in your own space and be like, okay, this is what I'm doing, this is what I got going on. But it is really powerful. And yeah, also forgiving yourself too, like your childhood self, for like, being like the person, like you had to wear that armor until you couldn't. You know what I mean? Like you have to put on those coping mechanisms and protecting yourself to a sense. And like it is an important role and an important factor to be able to grow and be who you are today, going through your spiritual awakening. Like you wouldn't have had a spiritual awakening if you didn't have that armor that you needed to kind of like chisel away, like you said. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, man, it's well, it's actually, I will say, just putting a pin in where I'm at, like it's beautiful to actually be able to express that more clearly now. Like as time passes in this experience for me, becomes more in my rear view mirror, I'm able to process what it really did for me, and it'll be interesting to see like if I, if I'm sharing that story in 10 years, like maybe it'll like what's this going to look like? How's it going to reframe the person that I am?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love that. Also, I wanted to add too, just before we like transitioned into the next, but when you have like sexual trauma too, you tend to, whether it's with a male, like, or a female, whatever that happens, you tend to have a wound within your like masculine or feminine energy too. So a lot of the times, like as a woman going through sexual trauma, you tend to, that's where like beating down the masculine energy internally comes in, and then you overcompensate with that feminine energy. Just wanted to throw that out there. That kind of all correlates together, just so you know.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's probably an important piece. I bet you that sentence right there will probably speak to quite a few people. Okay, so if the situation we just expressed, the situation we just talked about, of course they can contact you. You have a website, and they can, if they're ready to process these things, and they're getting the right vibes from speaking with you, or seeing you on here, they can reach out to you. But what are some other, off the top of your head, like what are some resources if someone's like, wow, okay, maybe I'm ready to experience that. Like that sounds like I think I'm ready to face those things. I want to heal these things. Like where would be your suggestion for a starting point? Someone who just wants to kind of start diving into these things, or dip their little toe in the water. What do you think? Where would we send them?
Where would we send them? I would just say, I don't know. Like, I feel like, as corny as it sounds sometimes, like Instagram really does have a lot of like
Absolutely.
platforms and opportunities for you to kind of like read and deep dive into the underlying like traumatic experiences and like the emotional position behind it. But yeah, there's like I don't even know, there's so many that I follow, I couldn't even pinpoint them. But just starting and finding hashtags that kind of correlate with like what you want to heal, Um, anything like spirituality, if that's like something you're wanting to dive into, is just like awakening, hashtag, sexual trauma, hashtag, whatever, typing those in and finding like certain pages that really correlate with, um,
Mm.
what you're feeling, like your vibe. Because my vibe and the pages I follow can be completely different from, the next person's.
Yeah. So kind of
Yeah.
like trusting what you're, because a lot of the like I've stated multiple times already, a lot of these the words and the terminologies and the, a lot of the more spiritual words are to someone who's very unconscious, to someone who's very set in their ways, who's not like kind of open into or ready to hear it rather.
Mm.
A lot of the terminology and the things that are said on some of these accounts are a little like, oh, that doesn't resonate with me. I don't get that. I don't know what they're talking about. But as you reframe and you learn what these words mean and what they might mean to you as an individual, then
Mm.
you can flip that perspective. So I think you're totally right. I think that was a great example. Instagram, that's something that I did. I had taken a break from social media during that time when I was healing. But when I came
Mm.
back, I was like, I want to, if I'm going to have these little dopamine addictions, which I certainly do, I'm totally addicted to social media, just like everybody else. But
Yeah.
I was like, let's at least make it to where if I'm mindlessly scrolling for 5 minutes, it's some positive affirmations. It's some information about trauma. It's some stuff to like trigger my ego to where I'm like, oh, okay, I'm thinking this. So yeah,
Mhm.
following these pages, I really liked to. I would watch guys like Joe Rogan. I watched a ton of Joe Rogan and his guest. If I liked them or they seemed healing, I would follow them and check out their account. I'm like, oh, they got a book. I'm gonna read that book, or I'm gonna follow their
Mhm.
Instagram. And so yeah, just I exactly what Jaycie said. Follow your bliss, man. Like start making your daily habit of scrolling through social media, scrolling through Instagram. Um,
Mhm.
follow more accounts that speak to like the future version of you and that speak to in that show up with soft words for the inner child within you. We all have our own inner child, and sometimes it
Mhm.
needs to be spoken to, and Instagram's a great resource for that. So
Yeah, 100%. And then I feel like it kind of spirals from there. Like that's just a good starting point. And then, researching certain books that you want to read if that's something you want to dive into, and then starting slow. That's like my biggest advice that I could give to anybody like wanting to start their healing journey is like don't overwhelm yourself with like all of the things at one time. Like
mm,
start with Instagram, start with reading one book, start with doing a 10-minute meditation, start with a guided journal, start with, all of the little things that like can make up maybe even, 30 minutes of your day. And like not, because that's I think where we get lost. We tend to get lost as human beings, and like starting this as we were like, what's going on? I'm stuck. I don't know what I'm doing. And it's like, yeah, we tend to overload our plate. We're like, we have to do all of the things and we have to be good at them and we have to
mm.
do them all right now. Like that's not the reality of the situation. You just have to start and start small, start somewhere. So
That's really important actually, because someone like me, I'm like I get obsessed with things. I'm all in. Like when I started doing this healing stuff, I'm like, yeah, if I'm awake, I'm listening to content about healing my childhood trauma. Like I'm all in. I'm gonna do yoga for 6 hours today, or I'm gonna try to
oh
meditate
my
for as long as
God.
possible. Like and that's not the way for everybody. So that I love that you said that. I think it's very important that you said that. Match where you're actually at. Like if you're not, I'm just like a intense dramatic person. I do things differently. Like I have to just go all in. It's if I just become like into this obsessive loop about it, and if that's not healthy for me, that's on my own to figure out. But um I get definitely, I think that's a very important thing. Like take one step at a time. Like if you don't have enough, I like Dr. Jordan Peterson talks about these sorts of things. Like if say you're at a point of like, I need to make a list for what I need to do today, or I need to make a list of things that need to be taken care of this month, and you're like, oh, it's so overwhelming, I can't do it. Like I can't make the list, I can't think of all these things. Well, what can you do? I can go to my desk, I can go to where I write, and I could set out a piece of paper with a pen on top of it. And then, okay,
Mhm.
let's let's walk around my room, let's read my book, let's play some video games, whatever your thing is. And then like, okay, well, what else can I do? What do I have the energy to do? I'm gonna walk over there and I'm gonna write one thing. I'm not gonna get my whole month schedule done. I'm gonna write one thing though. It's like you can't make your whole bed. Well, hey, pull your covers over. Make it look kind of made then. It's so important, and I'm really glad that you said that, Jaycie. Work where you're at.
100%. Yeah. And that is something that I also like tell clients that I work with because I try to not overwhelm them because it is really overwhelming sometimes navigating through things. And yeah, starting with, like you said, like a small list, right? Like one thing down. Or if you feel like you can do more than that, write like three things down, do them, and then do a couple more things on the list, and then do those, and kind of move through that. But also, one thing I do want to add to that is when you dive into the spiritual reality, um, we tend to look at so many different dynamics. We have like the really, really spiritual people, which I love and appreciate them for who they are. And then we have the kind of new, like just dipping their toe in, like don't really know what's going on. And I also want to point out that for some people, I struggled with this for a long time because I felt like I was like, not new into it at this point, but I'm also not like super like woke. Like, I mean, I am, but like I'm not super like spiritual, which I'm okay with. And I, respect the people for who they are, but I almost felt like I had to live up to a certain spiritual standard. And then I've talked to a girlfriend recently, and we've kind of come to this conclusion that like you can be extremely intuitive and really like psychically smart and spiritually intelligent and also still be like a human being and want to do nice things for yourself, like have nice clothes, have nice hair, have nice stuff, all in the same swing, you know what I mean? And as a woman, living up to certain societal standards, and men too, like living up to certain societal standards, and then correlating spirituality into that, we kind of think like, well, as a spiritual being, like I should not want to do any of those things. Like I should just want to live in a cabin in the woods and have no power and like not do my hair and like, not shave or anything. And it's like, I mean, you can have the same intellectual spirituality as that person, but also want to, have nice things. So being a human being is what I like to say, because being spiritual is like so alien form, and
Mhm.
being a human being, like we came here to be a human being. So be a fucking human being and correlate your spirituality into that and live it up, man. Live your life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that you said that too. A lot of these things are um, the in the meditation world. You can be like, you're a monk meditator and you wear robes and you live in the Tibetan mountains, or you could be a householder. Like you
Mhm.
meditate and you care about your conscious awareness, but you're a householder. You own a house. You live in the modern age. And then another one that resonates with that I've been saying nonstop lately because I just love it and it's been huge in my life is it was from either Timothy Leary or Ram Dass, but I heard Ram Dass repeat it, and it's always remember your Buddha nature and your social security number. Isn't that so great?
That's so valid. That's so real. Because it is like today, like, I mean, you can go however which way you please and respect to anybody out there who goes on whatever journey or pathway they choose. But yeah, like we are still human beings. We do still have a social security number. We do kind of still have to plug into the matrix. And we do have to also step out of that and put ourselves before any of that in the same
Mhm.
swing. So
And I
yeah,
think
yeah.
that's huge for things like grounding, and our lower chakras. I think that's we do need those things. We have to, I'll find I've definitely been one to be, really locked into my higher up chakras, and my feet are dangling way off the ground. I'm just way up in my zone, and it's like, oh, it's you got to get grounded, man. I mean, there's times in our lives, and especially me as a creator, I think there is times where it is good for me to escape into the ethereal realm of the crown and third eye chakra, but you know, coming back down to reality and remaining grounded is what's the good homeostasis, that good balance. Um, yeah, it's
Mhm.
so those things are they're all important. Your Buddha nature and your social security number, very important. JC, I would love to switch over to. I sent my homie last night. I have one of my good friends, one of my like close childhood friends. He's been going through a lot of his own healing lately. He's been reading some new books and doing the work. He's really diving in, and he's doing so great. And last night I sent him the 16 personalities quiz,
Mm.
and I was so excited to hear his response. And I'm like, oh, what are you like? What's and I think he was INTP is what he landed on. But you and I, Miss Jaycie, are both INFJs,
Yes.
and for me, again, this is something years ago that I would have been like, oh, okay, so that's like, I'm going to take that about as serious as I take our position on planet Earth versus the stars around us in astrology, and like just things that I never took serious before. I never, just because I didn't know anything about them.
Hmm.
My judgments of these things were based off of a position of no knowledge on them. So I felt comfortable in thinking I knew anything about it by never exploring into it. So learning about, taking personality quizzes, and it asks you a certain set of questions, and then it gives you a personality type. And when I read my personality type, when I read the INFJ and started watching videos about it, I legitimately cried. Like
Oh, wow.
I felt so like I've always I've always felt like black sheep. I was very black sheep in my family, but also I'm 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 aware of my black sheepness amongst even my friend groups, where I feel I belong very much, and they make me feel loved, but I do feel very different than them. In reading
Hmm.
the INFJ, I was like, wow, I feel I've never understood, like nobody's ever understood me like this. This is describing how my thought process goes. I felt validated in healthy ways. Tell me about your journey into the INFJ realm, the 16 personalities realm, and then do you recommend to other people to take personality tests and dive into that?
Oh my gosh, yes, please. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it was just reassuring because like not only for yourself, but especially like the people surrounding you, it just gives you a better understanding of where you're at, who you are, who you were born to be, and then the people surrounding you, like who you were born to be. Like if you're having, certain conflict in your friendships or certain conflict in your relationships or with family, that is also something that you can like include in that. So you're seeing them for who they are and what they offer and like their personality dynamics. So how they communicate, how they present themselves, how they show up. It kind of all runs through most of that. So yeah, it was very cool to read about. I don't know, I feel you on that. I've never been to I'm gonna kind of step into victimhood, but it's fine. I've always had a really hard time making the right kind of friendships, the right kind of dynamics. I've always been the codependent relationship person. I'm gonna own that. I've always been in relationships for as long as I can remember. And that's just part of my healing and a part of my process is going through that and understanding, being aware of my codependency. But yeah, and I've always had a really hard time making long lasting, standing, healthy friendship dynamics. I've had, friendships that I've been close with, but I was either, like partying and using or just in a really unhealthy mental state. And you kind of attract a very similar dynamic
Mhm.
of the person like mirroring you. And so, at no one's fault, like we just, fall apart. You know, turmoil, emotional turmoil happens, friction happens, and then, you're no longer really speaking, or it's just not how it used to be, which is growth, but very accepting of that. But yeah, so being an INFJ, I've personally, it helped me realize like I'm very introverted, I'm very quiet, I'm very to myself, I'm very in my thoughts, I'm very in my feelings. Um, and it is a very rare personality type, very, very rare. What is it like there's like 2% of the world or something like that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. And so, I'm a very like I love to connect with people who are just like me, which is really hard on myself because I have such high expectations. It just bites me in the ass.
Mhm.
And so it's allowed me to see that I don't have to just connect because it is such a rare personality type. Like I don't have to just connect with like my personality type. Like that's all ego based. I can connect with other personality types and see them for who they are and accept them for where they're at. but yeah, it helped me move through that process, because before I'm just like, poor me, why do I not have any friends that are just right there with me? I don't understand what's happening, what's going on. And I'd actually like get emotional about it, like cry like so often.
Uh,
But now I'm at a space where I'm like, oh, that's cool that I don't meet a lot of people who are like me. And I can accept and love, these new people walking into my life, or old people that are still in my life for who they are, and see them at a different light. So,
yeah. Yeah, it's pretty powerful stuff, isn't it? Like you can really I think not only learning about yourself, like there's that validation of which I think this is probably like healthy, a healthy amount of validation, self validation, um
mhm,
because that's always a tricky subject with self validation, especially with like our world of social media and acting
yeah.
out, trying to be impressive. But learning about yourself, learning about, because once you can kind of observe the way that you think and the way that you process things, it allows you to realize in a very profound, present, here way, that other people are coming to their own conclusions, and they're like other people of other personality types are not thinking the same way as you. Like they're experiencing a different perception of reality, because their internal dialogue and the way in which they um, perceive the world around them and the conversations around them, and then run it back through their own self. Like it's a different process than you, and you're doing
Hmm.
this magical thing of like relating to them and talking to them, and it's really impressive. Like with how different we're so similar in so many ways, but when you read the 16 personalities and a lot of these differences, up here we're pretty different how we form opinions of the world out here. So it's absolutely wonderful that we're even able to so properly connect and discuss things.
Yeah. No, I love it. Yeah, it's awesome. But yeah, you're absolutely right. How we navigate, it's like different lenses. Every person has a different lens that they see and hear the world in. And
Hmm.
yeah, and that's where, a lot of conflict comes from. And what is it, like the four agreements, like, expectations. You kind of expect people to think and navigate how you think, and you kind of just have to love and understand like the person for their viewpoint, their perspective, they're bringing value into your life. And so yeah, that's it is crazy to think about, because like me personally, like I get so frustrated sometimes, and I'm like, gosh, like I would do this way, like I don't understand why they're not doing it this way, and and it's like, well, I mean, they have a completely different brain, they're using probably a different portion of their brain, and
Mm-hmm.
especially from male to feminine, like male to female, we think and navigate differently. And then this is another perspective too, is like I'm left-handed, and so most right-handed people use the left side of their brain, and left-handed people use the right side of their brain. So navigating in that way too, like that's another perspective, is like, yeah, ultimately we're all just using different portions of our brain and how we see the world. And
Right.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
we're under this. I mean, like really not question perception that everybody is kind of living in. We all just live in the same shared reality, and we all act the same, and we all have the same emotions. Like we all experience. We all have access to be able to experience the plethora of human emotion, but the way in which we approach it, the way in which we dissect it, the way in which we experience it as it's happening and before it's happening, it's all different. We're all
Mm,
all the synapses are firing in the same way, but the way that the story is being centered and formed to form a personality and our responses and our reactions, it's different. And it helps
mhm,
you. I think it helps me actually be even more compassionate towards other people, because if I can see if someone's patient enough to like bear with me as I'm stumbling through my thought process, like I should certainly be doing the same for them, because they're not doing it the same
mm,
way that I am, but they are getting to their conclusions through some sort of way that I don't understand from firsthand experience. So
mm.
I've got to be willing to leave room for that. I've got to make some space for them and give them some time to express themselves.
100%. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I know, moving through like that was like such a big healing too, because like I don't know about you. I mean, I'm sure you've kind of brought it up, but like I am so like nitpicky and controlling.
Mm.
But not in like a overwhelming way. Just like I'll notice somebody doing something and I'll think internally like, oh man, I can totally do this way. Like why are,
Mm-hmm.
why are they not doing it that way? Da, da, da. But like stepping back, keeping my mouth shut, and just understanding that the process is going to be different. That's like one thing I really had to heal through, because I would be like, what are you doing? Like we can do it this way. But now like stepping back and being like, okay, it's fine. Like there's more than one way to, drive a car or walk on the sidewalk, or you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah, and that way you don't like step on what people are valuable for. Like you can really like allow them to shine in the light that only they can shine, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that's super valuable. Yeah, so I would recommend to anybody like check out the personality types. I know there's 16personalities.com or whatever it is. In and then there's oh man, there's humanmetrics.com. That's another one, and that's the Meyers-Briggs who is
Mm-hmm.
um I think Carl Jung had to do something with that. I could be totally wrong, but Meyer-Briggs, I think it was a mother and daughter who developed it. Psychologists. I could be butchering this, so definitely like do your own research. But it was it was like dude, just it's so funny just giving myself the time to like, all right, let's just fill out this cert. Like I felt like I was doing a MySpace questionnaire, but answering these questions and then you get your answer at the end, or you get, this paragraph of like, so here's what it seems like based off of your answers to this question. Here's how you perceive the world. Here's how you feel. Here's something that happens to you. And I'm reading it like, what? Like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
this is profound. And it's very helpful. And then back then, when I was in a relationship, it was also very helpful for me to read about my partner's ways. And so I could say like, oh, okay, here's how like when I'm standing there wondering why the hell she's thinking this way, when I clearly just presented the truth of what everything actually is in this situation, I can now say, oh, she perceives her reality differently than me, like the way that she gets to conclusions, the way that she reacts. And these are also things, Scorpio, Libra, Cancer, these sorts of things are also helpful for that. You can understand the person that you're in relationship with more more broadly, not just why don't you think exactly like me, because the way that I think is the only way that is, it's
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, no, and I definitely have done that with Jace too. So he's like I'm an INFP and he's an ENF, or INFJ. He's an ENFJ. So
mm,
he's just like the extroverted version, which I mean, I personally need that in a relationship. I'm so like awkward and like quiet in public settings, and he just shows up for that, which I
uh,
appreciate in a dynamic. So, but yeah, definitely allowed me to like understand him as a whole.
yeah, excellent. I would recommend that to people in relationships and people by themselves. Definitely check out 16personalities.com or Human Metrics. Um, or I mean, there's a bunch of other ones too, and they're all super helpful. Just explore whatever talks to you. And then for me, once I found my INFJ, I began listening to the Personality podcast. I think it's called the uh, Personality Hackers podcast, and that's on YouTube,
Okay.
and that was really good. I sent that to my buddy last night, and he's going to explore those. But we're getting fairly up here in time. I did want to talk about um, you are an intuitive empathic healer.
Mhm.
Can you explain to me, like I'm dumb Tarzan and I don't know what any of this means. Can you explain it to me as if that, because I feel it's beautiful. I love that you've stepped into this. I feel like once I started seeing you use words like this, and I starting to um like your soul identifying with these things more, to me as your friend and someone who you were on my podcast at the beginning, I'm like, yes, like that seems that resonates with me. I see that in Jaycie. So can you explain these terms, intuitive, empathic, healer? Can you explain that to me?
Yeah. Okay. So, I guess the easiest way that I can put it is just like, I don't like using this word because I feel like it's so like broad, and you think of this word and you think like psychic, right? So like channeling psychic. You think of a psychic, you think of like going into a space and like paying somebody and like
We've seen in
whatever
movies.
they,
Yeah.
yeah. And so, yeah, just like intuitive. So like I have just a long line of like psychics and mediums in my family. And so I've kind of been able to step into like those gifts. And so intuitive is just like gut feeling, using, channeling from I'm what is it called? So there's like there's clairaudient, clairvoyant, clairsentient. So clairaudient is like you can hear things, like you can hear spirit, I'm not that. Clairvoyant is like you can see things, visions. I get a little bit of those. Um, and then there's clairsentient, which is just like knowing. So like knowing everything, knowing things. Like sometimes I'll just like it's almost like computing, like downloads, I guess. Like you're computing, you're putting coding and whatever in the computer, and it inputs information for you, right? So it's ultimately, I guess, what I'm doing for my clients working with people. So yeah, sometimes people will just like be talking, or like they have like a certain illness, or they're not feeling good, and I'll just spit out like a random thing, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know where that came from, but you need it to heal. So yeah, and then there's a couple. I think there's like one more, but I can't think of it. But yeah, so yeah, that's kind of what I do.
Yeah.
I've more so stepped into that recently. So
It feels like man, how do I word it? It feels like abilities that are outside of ego identification, right? Like it's
mm,
like a, as an artistic person, I was talking with a musician friend on the podcast yesterday, and we were kind of talking about the process of creation and the process of like writing music. And it's this, to get in contact with the muse, or put your little net into the freeway of the muse and try to catch something, like let's catch a lyric, let's catch a song lyric. You get out of your own way. Like what you do mentally is like you just become so present, and you almost are able to turn off the thinking mind, so to say. And you're
mm,
listening to what needs to come up. And correct me if I'm wrong, but this seems like kind of what you would do. And I'm just trying to relay, because I think also as an INFJ, I think the way that you heal, and you bring up, sorry, I forgot the terminology that you just used, but the way that you process what needs to be heard, or say what needs to be said to you and your client, I think is a similar process to how I attempt to like write raps, or write lyrics, or create music. Is I try to get out of
mhm.
my own way, and I'm like, okay, this is what needed to come up. Does that resonate?
Yeah, 100%. Like that's, yeah, like channeling. Like it's almost like something comes over you, but in such a really fulfilling and positive way. And just kind of you like elbows deep, it just consumes you, and like you're just really elevated and really happy and really like it, like your purpose, like what you're supposed to be doing. Like music is your purpose, like you creating stuff is your purpose, and so you being able to like channel that and step into that and just kind of have something take over you, like that's why you're doing it, you know what I mean? And so that's kind of where this dynamic comes from. Yeah, just allowing everything to shed, being really present, and having, channeling from, I call it source, like it's just a
Mhm.
source to me. Um, but yeah, I don't know how else to.
Yeah. No, I think that sounds about right. That is the Yeah, it's again with terminology, we can expand on even things like source, because this is something that, again, at the beginning when I started this, I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? But uh, like source, God, the vortex, the there's all these terminologies that are actually like we get caught up in these pointless, like, no, it means this, or here's the right word for this, or here's the right mouth movement that describes this thing, and it all needs to be the same. And I think that what you find when you explore in this area is a lot of these terminologies are actually kind of, they're speaking to the same thing. They're speaking to this something that's more divine within you. And it's not like man in the clouds God. That's like this is like our veggie low level understanding of something that we really haven't thought about it, but we never questioned it that much. We just like sticking
Mhm.
to our guns, and like, I don't believe in God because I don't believe in a floating man in the sky. And it's like, no, but what about the source of all wisdom? What about the thing that makes evolution do what it's doing? What about the thing that was before the Big Bang? What about the how the fuck does an acorn know to grow into a wonderfully beautiful tree? How does it know that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the source that the acorn is using. That's the the biology, the evolution, the whatever that is telling that acorn to grow into a tree is, there's a thing within humans that's like that. Like, there's a trueness, there's a rightness relationship with the exterior world, and it matches up with our interior. And our ego minds in our modern society have really suppressed a lot of those. So to me, I think that humans have many abilities that we have lost connection with. We've
Mm-hmm.
forgotten. We're a species with amnesia in many ways. And I think, because of the internet and because our advancement in technology, I, people like you and I are able to now, connect with the the source within us, the thing that just feels right, and we're going to trust it. And I can't wait till we're, when we're 40, 50 years old and we're looking back at, like, now we've been able to sharpen these things. We've been able to learn how to really listen to that inner voice.
Mm-hmm.
We've stayed on the path. And I mean, I'm very looking forward to and excited for the future of all of this knowledge and all of this learning and all of this, hopefully helping other people along the way too. I just imagine what we're going to be able to do in 40, 50 years.
I like honestly couldn't even imagine at this point. Like it's insane to even think. But yeah, 100% agree with you. Putting in the work now, I feel like is going to, for all of us as a collective, putting in that work now and really tapping into, because everybody's capable of channeling and tapping into source, whatever that looks like. Each person's different, and that's totally okay. Um, but yeah, you're capable of just like digging deep and really being able to connect with like your intuition and like what feels good and what feels right to you. Because ultimately, like that is our only real thing. I feel like is your solidified feeling good and knowing like what's right for you. Like you're the only person that can know what's right for you and know what you need to be doing and know what your purpose is. Nobody else can tell you
Mm,
outside of that. So
yeah, definitely.
mhm.
Attuning your frequency to to your tuning your frequency to your inner voice, to your intuition. There is
Mhm.
something that, I mean, words can't express it, but it's a rightness. It's not even fulfilling. Fulfilling isn't even the correct word, but it's a knowing of, this is where it is. This is the thing in which I've been looking for without, while unknowingly looking for it. Right?
Mhm.
It's yeah, wow, yeah. There's a lot of healing to be had there, and a lot of yeah, just a lot of knowing. I guess I'm at a loss for words for a lot of it, but that's the
Mhm.
funny thing too, is words, these mouth movements, these agreements that, when I hold up a banana and I say banana, we all agree that's what that means. That's what you're pointing out, and we're as human beings, as we're being projected from somewhere else, or there's a frequency being hit by our body, which is the receiver, and we're trying to align with what we truthfully are. Words don't always cover all of it. So getting in
Mhm.
touch with the feeling side of things is important. So I do want to, JC, we're getting up here in time. Um, I wanted to round anything out. Anything else that you wanted to throw in here, definitely do so. But I was thinking, just I would love to end it on. I have one question for you, and then I would love to end on kind of your elevator pitch for people who are like, they're interested in your work and they want to like check out your website. So maybe like your elevator pitch for that. So like, hey, if you're ready to heal up, like I want to hear your trailer. What's your catching in of new people, because I think we've got a lot of people's attention during the podcast, and I want to send them your way to your website. So I'd like to answer that, but first, can we answer, JC, what does the world need more of right now?
understanding and presence, I would say. Um, yeah, just understanding of other people and where the world's at, and compassion. But those are like, I think, my three ultimates: understanding, presence, and compassion. Because with those three, we would be untouchable, like 100%. Yeah,
Okay,
that's
that's a
it.
great. I love that answer. That's a wonderful answer. I've been asking everybody that lately. What does the world need more of right now? So great response. Okay, now sell me on your website. Send me to your website. What's up with it?
Sending to my website. Okay. Yeah, it's a space open for, let me elaborate this a little bit more. I wanted to create a space for people to come in and, like, I don't know about you, but for me, when I have gone to therapy, which I've done for years and years and years and years, I've really just had a hard time. I've had a hard time with, like, opening up and connecting, and like I've always needed somebody to, like, draw things out of me, like an invisible energy rope. I need somebody to, like, ask me questions and trigger me and pinpoint things. And so for me, like, I had gone to therapy for, probably close to, like, 3 years, 4 years off and on. And I've been to many different therapists and had to retell my story and go through, like, the whole spiral thing. And I wanted a space to create for people where I will trigger you. I will draw things out of you. I will tell you what I see, and, open that space for you to express yourself, and a space for you to break down, but also give you the tools and tactics that you specifically need individualistically. Like, I give it on the spot. Like, I channel on the spot intuitively, like, okay, you're going through this, like, do this, and we'll kind of have a conversation about what I want the, next day to look like, or next week to look like. And yeah, so that's kind of what I do. And I open up different time frames. So I have, like, a 30-minute, an hour long reading, or I have, like, a 2-week process, a month long process, a 3-month long process. So it just kind of specifies for how long people want to dive in, and what they feel they need is necessary for their healing. But yeah, so that's kind of what I do and where I'm at. And I deal a lot with, I honestly, like, a part of me, like, wants to dive into the masculine energy, because I want men, and, like, men, mostly men, to feel like they have a space to open up. I do deal a lot with women, which I love, and, like, opening up that femininity and whatnot, but I want to, deal with both ends of the spectrum. Um, but I feel like that's kind of really hard. But I just want to throw that out there. I feel like it's really hard for men to kind of come to a woman and be like, okay, I need help. Um, but yeah, so that's the space that I create, the space that I open up. And yeah, my website, I mean, I have it on my Instagram, but my website in general is just lookingwithin.squarespace.com, and that's where you can find what I'm up to.
What's your Instagram handle?
I think it's Jaycie.Randall. It's my name. You'll probably have it on here, but
Yeah. I'll include it in the description.
yeah.
Yeah, cool, Jaycie. I'm so glad that you're doing this. To me, it sounds like I I don't want to. The word has its own annotations, and at different times in society, it's used in different ways. And so, be aware of, like, what comes up for you as a listener when I say this word. But I think what's happening now in our collective, consciousness, and what we need is I think the rebirth of the shaman character is actually happening. I think that it's being reframed. It's the person who observes society from almost outside of society, in a sense, like the person who goes into the mountains and explores different realities and different dimensions and different parts of the psychological buildup that we have here, and then they come back to the world, and give gifts of healing and give gifts of knowledge. And I think that what you're doing, and what a lot of people are doing, self-help authors, and people who are just helping people heal, are kind of like It seems to me like it's just the rebirth of the shaman character, the reintroduction of a shamanistic way of thinking into our modern society. And I think it's needed. I think it's beautiful. I think it's wonderful. I think it's helpful. And I'm super glad that you're doing it. And just as a fellow human who's trying to help people out too, Jaycie, thank you for doing what you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm super grateful. And everything just kind of fell into the perfect place for it to correlate into reality. So I'm super grateful for that. And 100% shaman. It's super funny that you say that. Like, sorry, I'm gonna like sidetrack here for a second. I went to this event and like we were creating stuff out of like driftwood. This was like pre-COVID. Creating stuff out of driftwood, and I literally made this like shaman stick almost, like just like, I don't know, I saw it and I was like, oh, that's cool, I'm gonna like wrap some stuff around it and like create this, and it looks like this shaman stick. And then I went and saw my grandma right after that, and she's like the more like, she's intuitive, like that's the line where I get it. She's like, and she's like, oh, Jaycie here stepped into her shamanship or whatever she called it. And she's so out there, but like so funny. And I was just like, Grandma, that's insane. I literally just like made a shaman stick like at this event I was just at. It's in my car. Like,
Wow.
but that's so funny that you say that. That's really funny. I mean, I'm not gonna correlate myself. Like, I don't really understand or what that means or what that looks like. But
Yeah.
That's funny you brought that word up.
Yeah, I think that word is, we're again taking a word that was used at a specific time in human history that specifically made sense for that time in history. So to reintroduce it, obviously it's going to have all of the old annotations. It's going to have some new annotations. We're a society who absorbs a lot of content in the form of television, video, movies, TV series, these sorts of things. So any versions of the word shaman that are used in those are kind of what fills the spot in our psyche right away. And so I think just leaving room to kind of wonder, like, what did the shaman character do for its society back then, for its people, for its community, and what are modern shamans doing for their community, and what are modern healers doing for their community? And there's a lot of correlations, and I think having those like finding things that resonate, like your grandma saying that, like that's, I don't know, you never know. Maybe there is some intuitive hints there into what you should be doing and what's actually going on. So it all comes full circle.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, thank you so much. I'm super excited I got to hop on here. And as your podcast has progressed, and, listening to all the people that you've worked with, like putting this out there, like that's your own shamanship, your own form of healing people too. So I can appreciate that and respect that so much. So
yeah, excellent. Yeah, I appreciate you coming on twice now. That's basically, I mean, with all this stuff, I'm just someone who's like, I'm going through my own shit. I'm just definitely far from perfect, never have been. I'm just trying to stumble and trip through things out loud to some extent, and basically, like everything that I post, every podcast that I do, every time I finish with something, I put it up with this, here, I hope this helps. Here, I hope this helps. Here, I hope this helps. Like that's my mantra, like that's what I try to do here. So I hope this has helped you listeners. I know that I feel like me personally, I feel like just this conversation has helped me already. So thank you, Jaycie. Thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for sharing your work. Listeners, check out her website, follow her on Instagram. If you haven't drank any water today, you're out of your mind. What are you doing, bro? You dry bones, just crusty, dusty. Ugh, I'm cringing at you not drinking water. You're not drinking water? I'm trying to guilt everybody into drinking more water.
good. That's a good perspective. Is I've had one drink of water today.
Jaycie, you're crusty and dusty, man. Oh man, you need to get some water. All right, we got to end this podcast because you need to go drink some water, my friend.
You are correct. Thank you so much.
All right, have a good day, listeners. Have a good day, Jaycie. Thanks again.
Bye. Yeah, have a good one.
Junkyard Love fans, where are you at right now? Are you present? Is your mind in the clouds? Is your head in the sky? Are you grounded? Are your feet touching the earth? Are you looking for something next to listen to? Are you projecting, letting these algorithms and letting the suggestions take away your life? Don't do that. Just a reminder to get present, to make the decision next that you want to make. Don't just get caught up and spending a whole day listening to YouTube or podcasts, even if it's mine. I just want the best for you. Take care of yourself. Live your life. Be present. Relax your shoulders. Relax your face muscles. Get your bare feet on the ground outside. Just go and be. Go and exist. And remember, life is more than just online. Life is more than just all this technology. Get present. Love yourself. Peace out. We'll see you next episode.